I wanted to stress that my father, who's 84 years old, still relatively healthy, doesn't complain about not being able to lift weights, doesn't complain about not being able to, do some of the things he was once able to do. He goes out and works in the garden a couple of hours a day, generally speaking. But if he were to accept the fact that you want anti-aging medicine, if you take the point I made in my talk about the fact that you have downregulation of external protein molecules, which includes the receptor molecules that you're talking about, then you have a situation, and this is one of the reasons why I think you can't get good results out of a growth hormone study, is that no one has done a study that says, okay, this is what it does in young people, where the cells are producing these receptors 90% of the time, or 100% of the time even, versus this is what happens when you deal with it in old people, where the cells have the protein production mechanism shut down maybe 30–40% of the time, because the results of the mouse studies do show the endoplasmic reticulum stress response is activated in old mice. So you've got a situation there where they're unable to effectively recycle the receptors and accept the signals coming off of them because they may be mutated. And so how do you deal with that problem that you could be prescribing growth hormone or testosterone for people who are unable to utilize it in an effective manner?
Actually, there was a really, we had a good conference at Kronos presented at Kronos Longevity Institute out of Phoenix about sarcopenia, which is really, aging muscle is not the same as young muscle and old muscle are not the same. Old muscle is full of anti-inflammatory IL interleukins of all types, so therefore receptors are not going to be the same. I mean, receptors age as well, they mutate, they do all kinds of crazy things. So you're not going to get the same response. There's no question. I mean, you're not going to, just like this old car theory, you're not going to take an old car, put high octane fuel into it and make it into a brand new Maserati. It's just, the aging system so we have to really resolve this aging stuff of aging muscle, because if you take biopsies of young guys and old guys, well, yeah, this old guy's training and he's doing pretty well, but his muscle, all kinds of, you're going to come up with all kinds of profound inflammatory cytokine blah 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 changes which are not found in young muscle. If we can solve that puzzle, then these kinds of medicines are going to work a lot better, or these drugs, I think.
Actually, Robert Bradbury asked a question and didn't really answer Noel's original comment, which I think what David Kekich wanted you to do, which is the notion that adult stem cells taken from a person of a certain age, whether induced pluripotent stem cells or whatever, are in a distribution of some mutated ones and some still very youthful ones, which we call pristine stem cells, and explain the methodology for distinguishing those, concentrating the pristine ones, and only putting those back.
Yeah, it's an extension of the current stem cell therapies, where you would basically take, because all stem cell therapies currently are done in bulk. So you're using millions, or what did they say, 20 million cells in the video, something like that. And so you have a range of quality of cells. Pristine cells are the quality of cells that you probably had when you were born, because you are able to analyze them from a biochemical standpoint, determine that the mutations are in either genes you have no interest in. If I'm replenishing the heart, I don't care if the neuron genes are mutated, or they're entirely in the junk DNA. Now, up until this week, doing that for tens or hundreds of cells to find the pristine cell was prohibitively expensive, because it cost $200,000 to sequence a single genome. If you want to do it by sequencing, there are chip analytical methods you can use now, and the mouse study that I mentioned has done that, because they were doing aging gene analysis in mice at young, middle-aged, and old. And the old cells that they were looking at had the stress response genes activated, or at least some of them. And so if you are taking the cardiospheres out of someone who is, say, 60 or 70, they are not going to work as well unless you isolate the pristine cells. And the interesting thing is that if you look at Regenex in Colorado, who are doing bone marrow stem cell therapy for arthritis or other similar joint injuries, they have on their website, and I think they said it was like a 70% success rate. And they are doing some kind of they're also doing pre-screening to say, nope, you're just not a good candidate. Now, some of that may be physiology, of the individual, or whatever. But I would suspect strongly that the situation where they do not get good results are old people whose cells simply are incapable of performing the function they performed when you were born. And that jives fairly well with the work by Derek Rossi at Stanford. And now, last time I talked to him, he was preparing a grant at Harvard. Yeah. And he basically is finding that, because the standard wisdom, the conventional wisdom, when I went to school, probably through most of the 90s, was that, oh, stem cells, miracle cells, they can fix everything. And but what Rossi found was that stem cells from old mice cannot restore the immune system in a bone marrow transplant the same way stem cells from young mice can. And that says that stem cells from old mice are different from stem cells from young mice. And so if the stem cell community does not wrestle with the quality of the stem cells, and this is an argument for using embryonic stem cells, but another study out of Stanford has shown that if you're using embryonic stem cells with a foreign immune system, the immune system will take them out within a couple of months. So all the work that was done through the 90s and the early 2000s using embryonic stem cells and all of the politics that we went at, debated up and down, caused all kinds of furor, presidents, making speeches about it, was probably totally useless unless you intended to put the patient being treated on immune system suppressing drugs, which a lot of people would not want to undergo because you increase your risk for catching all kinds of diseases. And so you really want to do autologous stem cell therapies. And as I mentioned, there are 2,600 of these currently. Well, I assume most of them are autologous therapies for heart or muscle, joint, whatever, bone. And because the embryonic issue is still so up in the air. And those will not suffer the problem of immune system rejection. And therefore, you're almost like every study we've been getting that I've seen, they're reporting generally positive results. Other than the fact that you do have problems if you're treating a beating heart with these and you're injecting through the blood, it's hard to get the stem cells to adhere properly in a bloodstream flow. But they're trying to come up with techniques where you can actually go in, either slow down the heart or do micro injections where you want the stem cells to go so that they're fixed in place. And if they manage to perfect that, then the therapies for heart are good. But therapies for joints are actually working very well, apparently. And they treated something like 6,000 or 7,000 patients. And they are avoiding the FDA problem because they are only operating in the state of Colorado and they only have to deal with the state medical board.
I might add one thing to Robert's dissertation about the rationale as to how you get pristine stem cells, how you select for them, and why some of them are actually pristine and others aren't. And it just boils down to the fact that your cells, and stem cells in particular, but cells, are damaged as we age due to the processes of life. But they're damaged randomly. They're not damaged uniformly. So some very few lucky cells escape this damage as year after year after year. Robert has developed a way to screen and isolate and identify these pristine cells. Now, whether they're as pristine as they were when you were born, or whether they were equivalent to your cells in your 20s or 30s, depending on your age, his technology isolates the best cells in your body and discards the ones that are mutated, and also would probably eliminate the possibility, or at least the risk, of inducing cancer to a patient when you're taking some of their cells, growing them in bulk, and then treating them with a whole bunch of damaged mutated cells. That could possibly be a cancer trigger.